Welcome to the Hernia Gods Podcast. This is your mere mortal host, Luke Elms. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or opinions of Orlando Health or any of our employers. And now, without further ado, let's talk hernias. All right, welcome to the Hernia Gods Podcast. This is your mere mortal host, Luke Elms, and I am joined today by Hector Valenzuela from Mexico. We are so humbled that you've decided to come on the podcast and have a conversation with us. So thank you.
No problem. It's my absolute pleasure. I greet you from Guadalajara, Mexico, where mere mortal Hector Valenzuela lives, and is happy to participate and collaborate with you, my friend.
Well, I very much appreciate your willingness to discuss. And as we usually do, I'd like to just start by getting to know you. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and how you kind of got where you are.
All right. Well, I am born and raised a surgeon in Mexico. I currently live in the city of Guadalajara, but I was actually born in Mérida, which is closer to the south near the Yucatan, Chichen Itza pyramids. And we came to live to Guadalajara when I was 9 years old. And this is the city where I grew up. This is where I established my roots. This is where I went to school and where I was lucky enough to stay working after I finished my residency. I am the older child or older brother in a two siblings family. My father is a nutritionist, and my mother was a stay-home mom, and she was very nice to us as we were growing up. And I am the older brother, and my younger brother is an anesthesiologist, and he currently practices together with me 2 days a week, and we have a lot of fun together.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you have your father's a nutritionist, and then you both became physicians. That's awesome.
Correct. Yeah. So my father, it's an interesting story. My father is the first in his family line to go to college, and he studied medicine. And then while he was doing medicine, he liked nutrition. And when he graduated, he just dedicated to be a nutritionist. And I don't have any relatives or any family who is a physician, much less as a surgeon. But it is funny that when I went into medical school, the portrait of a doctor that I most related to was the doctor with the hat, the gloves, the scrubs, not the doctor with the tie and the suit in the office. I related more to the surgeon without knowing it was a surgeon. And when I went into medical school, one of the first subjects that I took was anatomy, of course. And the anatomy teacher was a gynecologist, not a surgeon, but a gynecologist. And he said, whoever aced this period with me is going to get invited to come to a surgery. And for me, that just lit my brain. I wanted so much to go into the OR. I don't know why. It was just something in me. So I wasn't a A student, but I aced that subject just in order to be invited to surgery. So my first surgery was actually a C-section, and it's really something that I felt a calling my whole life.
That's fantastic. Yeah, whenever I went to medical school, first of all, my father was a musician, but ended up being mostly a farmer and a school music teacher. And my mother was a elementary school teacher as well. And both my brother and I are physicians. And so I relate to that aspect. When you're blazing kind of a path that your family really hasn't blazed before, it's a little bit interesting, because I think in one way it's kind of freeing, because there is no expectation of you. And so you do get to go in and relate to what aspect of being a physician that you relate to with really no pressure. Because I don't know that do you feel like your family had any expectations of what you were going to become, or was it just kind of you got to pursue what interested you?
Well, there were no expectations from them, but at the same time, when you are the first let's say a specialist, medical specialist in your family line, everybody is already so proud of you.
Hmm.
So you have to give them reasons to be proud of.
Yeah.
So you're always working hard to achieve, and that becomes a pressure not from them but from your own self
Yes.
to to perform, to achieve, to give them reasons to be proud of. Of
Yeah,
course.
no, I completely understand that. There's a ton of pressure,
Yeah.
because it's an interesting thing to be in those situations, and you feel kind of like you got like the weight of expectation of the family, and just like you said though, I experienced very similar. I don't think it was necessarily my family. I think it was me.
Yeah.
I had these goals for myself, and I'm wired in a way that I feel like if I'm not doing the hardest thing I'm capable of doing, then somehow I'm failing. And so that has the benefit of making you very successful at times, but it can also drive you to do things that you otherwise may not find the biggest happiness doing, just because that's like, I'm just drawn to things that I'm not good at or think that I could be better at.
Yeah.
You know, whenever you went through and got into doing C-sections and things, did you ever consider anything other than straight up general surgery?
Yeah. I was training and very much focused into becoming an oncology surgeon. In Mexico, surgical oncology is a separate specialty. You can do oncology cases as a general surgeon, but it is much better accepted if you do surgical oncology, which is 3 more years of residency, and then you're a more wholesome oncology surgeon. Because as a general surgeon, you'll do neck, you'll do abdomen, but you'll never do breast, you'll never do like miscellaneous organs and
Right.
structures. So when I was in my internship, I didn't even do a rotation in general surgery. I rotated 1 month in surgical oncology and 1 month in urology, which was back there as a possibility. But my what I wanted to do, even through residency, was surgical oncology. And so all my training when I was doing rotations, sometimes I could go to plastic surgery, and everybody wanted to be a plastic surgeon at the time I was doing residency. So when I was going to go to plastic surgery, whoever was in oncology surgery, I will tell them, so you want to trade, you go to plastic surgery and I go to surgical oncology, and I would trade. So in my residency, I never stepped in plastic surgery.
Uh-huh.
Whenever I was supposed to be in plastic surgery, I was in surgical oncology, and I was for sure going to be a surgical oncologist, because for me, and I now understand, my ego at that time was the highest ranked surgeon in the hospital. He's the guy that could do anything and everything in every single part of the human body. So
Yeah.
that's who I wanted to be. But I still love huge cases, but I understand that my ego is that wanted to, do more and more and more and more and achieve so highly, so I could like fulfill my own set expectations.
Do you what At what age did you come to this realization that you were being driven by an ego, and that may not be necessarily the best thing for you personally, but
Oh my,
it was what you were being driven to do?
it came far too late. It's just probably 2 3 years ago. It's
Mhm.
it's something that probably it's maybe something that I missed from having like a parent or a figure that I could ask things to and whom I can learn from uh, by being a medical specialist. And maybe this would have come to me earlier if I had this figure, but this is something that I had to learn by myself. And there's one phrase that triggered it. Once I was listening to a smart person talk, and he said, before you do anything, you need to ask yourself, is it me who wants to do this, or is it my ego that wants me to do it? And
Yeah.
then I started thinking back, and I realized that a lot of the things that I have done have been driven by my ego. And I realized, because once I achieve them, I don't have the sense of fulfillment
Yeah.
that I was expecting to have after doing such a thing. And it's just a couple of years back that some a little bit of my personal growth allowed me to understand these things.
Yeah, I can honestly say I'm probably a general surgeon because of my ego. I went through first of all, I didn't really want to go to medical school. That wasn't really something that I really wanted to do. My wife and I have been together since we were young. She wanted to go. I was just very terrified of like losing her. I was, and I wanted to be near her, and so I knew that I was capable of things like that. And so whenever the time came, I went through the process and did biology major and things like that, and went for that. And when I got in, though, as I went through medical school, I didn't particularly enjoy anatomy. I very much enjoyed, honestly, like psychiatry. I enjoyed that rotation. I
Okay.
enjoyed some of the other rotations. And as I went through my different rotations in third year, I ended up settling on OBGYN, and my wife settled on surgery.
Okay.
And surgery was my last rotation. And I went into surgery and had immense respect, very much like what you were talking about with the surgical oncologists. Like I walked into the trauma bay and I was on an emergency department rotation, and I watched the trauma team come in and take over a trauma case. And I was just like, well, those guys are badass. Like that's crazy. Like nobody turns down the help of a general surgeon, and so I was like, my ego was like, I want to be
Yeah.
that guy.
That.
I want to be that guy, I want to be the guy that comes in and saves the day. And that
Right.
was my ego talking. And so whenever it came time for us to apply, like the week before we were getting ready to apply, it was very, very close. My wife comes home. I was on an OB-GYN sub-I. I come home and I'm like, I don't really enjoy pelvic exams. and she goes, I don't really enjoy dealing with guys. And I was just like, well, that explains a lot. But irrespective of of that side, I was like, yeah, I think I want to do surgery. She's like, I think I want to do OB-GYN. So we went to funny story. I went to one of the people and one of the trauma surgeons to get a letter of recommendation. And I knew her and we were good. But I sat down and I said, hey, I'm going to do surgery. She's like, that's great. And she goes, so you and Autumn are both going to try to match into general surgery. And I go, well, actually, Autumn's going to do OB-GYN. And she goes, she's doing what? And I go, well, she's doing OB-GYN. And she looks at me and she goes, you'll get your letter. Bye. And I was like, uh-oh. So I left. And so we ended up matching into our respective deals. But, as I went through my training, I was again just driven and driven and driven by this. Oh, well, the next time I accomplish this goal or I set out to do something that scares me and I overcome my fear and I do something hard, is that going to be the time that I feel good about it? And I never did. And that's what led me to this kind of like this existential crisis right as I graduated residency of going, I've accomplished so much, but I'm not happy. And it's taken me years and years to try and figure out like what that is. I'm still a work in progress. So when you talk about having that realization that you've been driven in the past by ego, I 100% understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. I listened to your podcast, by the way, and I think you and I are very alike, and all of the surgeons, we are a lot alike, especially in some parts of our development. We just don't find the confidence to be outspoken about these constant issues that we go inside ourselves because we think we're alone. And this is why I have great kudos for you by doing this podcast, because you're bringing out things that probably we all should hear and we all can learn from, and we can heal ourselves by listening to others and understand that we are not alone. I meant that you and I are very alike because even our stories are very similar. If I may tell you a little bit of my
Absolutely.
background. I was also super high in sports. I played almost every sport possible to play here in Mexico. This is going to be interesting. My biggest sport was hockey, and I'm in a hot country, but the city where I live has a hockey rink, and we could play either indoor inline hockey or we could play ice hockey. So I was very, very, very much into playing hockey. And I'm also a musician. I taught myself how to play drums when I was in my first year of high school, my freshman year. And this was just out of the desire to be in a band because I had a friend that played bass. I had a friend that played a guitar, and I had a friend that played drums, but he didn't like playing the drums. So we made a deal, and he allowed me to borrow his drum kit, and I taught myself how to play drums. And throughout high school, I was very big into music. And then when I finished high school, and I told my father I wanted to go into medical school, he looked at me and he said, "Nah, no, you don't." And I said, "No, for real, I want to be a doctor." So he said, "Take 1 year off, go to the US, learn and speak English better. And if when you come back, you're still wanting to be a doctor, you'll go to medical school." So I went to Phoenix, Arizona. I have an aunt that lives there, and I redid my senior year of high school because in Mexico it's only 3 years of high school. So I got to do my what it would have been my fourth year. So I did my senior year of high school again, and in Moon Valley High School in Phoenix, Arizona, I was second in state in tennis. I played tennis,
Wow.
and I also joined the band.
Yeah.
And I played with this band, and I had the best time of my life. And
Mhm.
then, as the year was finishing, my father said, "Okay, so when you come back, what do you want to do?" And I told him, "I still want to be a doctor."
Yeah.
So that's how I came back to Mexico, and I started doing medicine. But really, without just for this inner calling, but without knowing very well what I was getting into, because I didn't have any relationship with any doctors or physicians or surgeons in my life whatsoever. And also, my wife is a physician. We met actually when I was being a drummer during high school.
Mhm.
We saw each other again in medical school. We never got to hang out a lot during medical school, but then we went to the same hospital to do our internship.
Mhm.
And in the during the internship is when we started dating, and it wasn't long before I gave her the ring.
Yeah.
I during the internship on the last couple months, I was set that this was going to
Yeah.
be the woman I marry, and I gave her the ring, and I told her we're gonna get married. We just need to sort things out, like the specialties and where we're gonna live and everything.
Right.
But life worked in our favor,
Okay.
and we both. She's a hematologist, so she trained in the same hospital where I was lucky to train. We both finished our residency in the same year. We got married 1 year, 2 years before finishing the residency. And our baby daughter was born just a few months before we our baby daughter back then, right now, she's a 12-year-old baby still for me.
Yeah.
And then she was born just a few months before the residency was over. And she's one of the main reasons, not but as something that kept me from going into surgical oncology. But when my daughter was born and my wife and I were married, and we're living in a country where money is a problem, money is an issue, you need to work. So I said to myself, I can't do 3 more years of very low wage paying as a resident.
Mhm.
And I had such great hunger to grow and to work and to start having an income and
Yeah.
provide a good life for my then born baby daughter and my wife, that even during residency I was working. As a resident, I worked at the hospital and I get very little wage from this,
Mhm.
but I was also starting to develop what at the time I didn't know, but was my private practice. I was, if somebody called me to go to a hospital to change a dressing, I would go. If
Right.
they will call me to go see a patient with diarrhea, I would go. Surgeons from my hospital will tell me to go help them or assist them in surgeries to hospitals, and I will get a little bit of money for that. I'll go do that.
Mhm.
If in the middle of the night, one of them didn't want to wake up for one of the calls, and they just needed somebody to go put the patient in the hospital and
Yep.
do the paperwork, I would do that.
Mhm.
So all this hunger had something already working for me, which was very early private practice developing. And by the time I finished residency and it was time to go into surgical oncology, I said, okay, so I'm going to be a general surgeon. But I don't say this as if my daughter had limited me from doing this.
Sure.
I say it as if life puts you in the place you need to be.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, surgical oncology was not for me
Yeah.
because this is what has brought me to be a hernia surgeon, which, by the way, I didn't plan to be a hernia surgeon. I think none of us plans to be a hernia surgeon,
Hmm.
but then somehow life brings you to this pathway in which you end up being a hernia surgeon, and you find such great fulfillment in doing this that I know my daughter being born and the context that I was living in my life at that point in time really was the perfect storm to bring me to the place where I am today, which is a very happy place.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that your story is so, it's refreshing to hear. Just like you said before, it's just, you're not alone. Those types of the story that you tell when you're, whenever you're talking about your wife, you finding, your love and in the middle of training, that is, it is, it's like trauma bonding a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's also extremely hard to maintain that relationship when you're both working so hard. I think being in a relationship with someone who's in the medical field has the benefit of understanding to a certain extent. But there's even aspects, my wife being OB-GYN, there are aspects that I'll never be able to understand some of the stressors that she's under with her specific specialty, even being a surgeon. And the flip side is true as well. But you talk about your daughter being the catalyst that kind of drove you to divert away from surgical oncology. I was going through my own problems personally, and my wife was, my relationship was not going well. I was planning on doing a head and neck fellowship,
Mm-hmm.
or at least pursuing that, and I decided against that because I was scared that we would lose our relationship completely after a really hard 5 years of residency training where we were both working a lot, weren't around each other a lot. It's such a formative time of life that you're just so different as a human being just through those 5 years of life, no matter what you're doing. And then you're doing that during medical training, which is very stressful and alters you in ways that's unpredictable. And so that coming back together was kind of hard for us. But the other thing that you mentioned that I relate to as well is, I grew up and we were farmers. And so we lived fine. I was never going hungry or anything, but we were very heavily indebted to the bank. And so money and that instability and that fear that, this may be the crop that goes bad and we get everything taken from us by the bank, that like money concern was always something. My wife grew up without a whole lot of means either. And so when you're investing so heavily, at least in our case, we're going further and further and further in debt, really betting on ourselves. At some point you go, like you said, you're not making much money. And you say, like, I can't delay this any further. Like it's getting too big. Like if this goes poorly, if I fail at something, might be I may never recover from this. And so that financial pressure, it really does drive decisions. And not everybody experiences that. And I know some people that just, get to pursue what they want to pursue without those concerns. And I think that's what I kind of want for my children. I don't necessarily want my children I still want them to have that hunger to achieve and everything like that. But I do want them to be able to go into what they want to go into that fulfills them, not based on external pressures and that fear of investing in yourself, because I really never had a model of what it looked like to go that heavily invested in yourself and see it pay off.
Yeah. So hunger, and I don't mean like Tommy hunger, just
Yeah.
hunger of life.
Mm-hmm.
Is probably one of the things that drives us the most. When Anna, and my wife's name is Anna, when we were in training, I'm always in observation. I'm looking at people, right? So I was looking at some of whom I consider to be the best medical specialists that you have a lot of admiration for. You see how they work in the hospital and how they handle themselves, and you have such great admiration.
Yeah.
But then you look at them outside of the hospital and you see that they're having trouble making ends meet.
Yeah.
No matter how great they are, their personal life, uh, uh, in the aspect of money and making ends meet, is not working out so well. So you start paying attention to things that they don't teach you during residency. And these situations, it's probably something that brought me and Anna together. One time I was very concerned about how things were going, and I was telling her, what are we going to do? Are we going to stay in Mexico? Are we going to go somewhere else? How are we going to make it work? And we were just going out by then, and I haven't even asked her to marry me yet. But she said, whatever we do it together. And for me, it's a moment that I say, okay, so she's in my team. So from then on, in every decision, every choice in life that we made it together. So uh, scarcity, hunger drives you to make decisions, but it also puts you in places where you find the right person to make these decisions with, and it builds a team around you. And this team is your initially my wife and my children, and then as the practice and the life develops, who are going to be your best friends, who are going to be your very close relatives, who is going to be the people that you practice with, who's going to be your team, your anesthesiologist, and the rest of the guys that you're surrounded by. So I think it's good. It's good to be hungry.
Yeah, there's your social circles that you're talking about. They change over time,
Yeah.
and the people that you may have grown up with and been very close to you're still very close to them, but they don't necessarily understand the phase of life or the aspects of what you're going through now. For instance, like whenever you go to medical school, I'd always been top of the class, right? And so then my family's, I'm in medical school stressing out about a test. They're like, you're gonna be fine. You've always been top of the class. And I'm like, yeah, so is everybody else in this class.
Mhm.
Like everybody else, you're pyramided up. So there's those aspects that are tough. But one other thing you talked about is kind of like that mentorship. And you look at, and I think that that's something in surgery that I think we're focusing on it. There's quite a bit of focus out there with different, even through the AHS and through different societies and things of getting a more structured mentorship. But one thing I think I didn't really fully understand until later is that you need multiple mentors. And you want to become just similar to how in training, you want to take bits and pieces from all of your attendings and kind of
Yeah.
be the sum of those parts be larger than any one of them that you took from. But I think it's the same thing with mentorship. There are people in my looking back in my past that I wanted to emulate. And some of those people, I wanted to emulate them. And I didn't realize that, yeah, they were incredible surgeons, incredibly dedicated, but their personal life was an absolute disaster. And then there are other people that were painted, as people that weren't necessarily dedicated to their craft, but they had focus on, being present for their kids or focused on wanting to maintain their own hobbies and things like that also give you a sense of fulfillment and make you a better, well-rounded person, which I think makes you a better physician.
Yeah.
But I think that we don't do a good enough job in training because I teach residents still. We don't do a good enough job in training of really kind of directly stating like, hey, you probably don't want to just be that person, right? You want to have this component of that person. And maybe you want to look over here and say, this person handles their family life in a way they're dedicated to, maybe they have a family vacation every year that they take that's very, very meaningful to them, and they make time for it and they do it. Those are that aspect of choosing your mentors wisely to become a better version of you. I think that's really important, and it's something I don't think we stress enough.
Well, the thing is that we don't know what features to look in a mentor in
Mhm.
the beginning, because you're only looking at the surface of what looks successful. And sometimes the things that you have admiration for in a person are good things, but it doesn't paint the full picture.
Right.
And this is probably what led to my first and bigger crisis when I finished residency. Because when I finished residency, as I say, I just after 4 years of general surgery, I started private practice. I didn't go to work into any institutional hospitals or public hospitals. I just started a private practice. And I, the definition of Hector Valenzuela was a surgeon. After 4 years of residency, there was no more musician. There was no more sports. I wasn't even the same guy that had friends in high school and could hang out anywhere. If I go to a wedding or a party or just a hangout with people, the only conversations that I could have were about medicine.
Yeah.
And I didn't belong to any sports team or anything. I was isolated, but I was proud of myself for that, because I thought I was doing the right thing, because the
Right.
people I looked up to in the residency were also defined by being these great surgeons. So I just wanted to be a great surgeon. And at this point in time, my wife, she's incredibly wise, super wise, and she's always like steps ahead. She was seeing these problems in me, and I was reluctant to accept it. And probably my daughter was like 8 or 9 months, and I came home from work. I was overworked, as everybody is under in this period of life, overworked and underpaid. And I came from work, and I wanted to spend time with her, and I wanted to, hold her, and she would refuse to be held by me.
Yeah.
She wouldn't want to be held by me. She wouldn't want to work with me. I couldn't give her her bottle. And I asked my wife, well, what's going on? Isn't she happy to see me? And she told me, you need to spend some time with her. You need to play with her, and she needs to, get to know you, because you're hardly ever here.
Yeah.
So I started doing that, going down into the floor with her and playing with her little toys. And that got a little better, and my relationship with her improved, and kind of opened up my eyes to the fact that I was becoming isolated. I was isolating myself from everybody else.
Yeah.
And it got to a point in which I love doing surgery, by the way. If I were to start my life over, I would be a surgeon 100% of the times.
Mhm.
But it got to a point in which I wasn't enjoying doing surgery anymore.
Yeah.
I was doing this surgery, but I was being anxious while I was doing the surgery, and I wasn't enjoying it. And I was always in constant fear of complications.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
whenever I got a call from a patient, if maybe the patient wanted to eat tacos, right? And he just wanted to check with me if it's okay to eat them after having an appendectomy.
Yeah. Right.
So if I see the phone ring, for me, the patient's abdomen just bursted, and
Yeah.
he was leaking stool, and in my mind, everything was going terrible. So
Yeah.
I started realizing that this wasn't the right pathway. I wasn't enjoying what I was doing anymore. I was isolating myself from people and from activities, and I was defining myself as something that is just a very little part of me. But there's more to me than just being a surgeon.
Yeah.
And it's one of the first time I seek some kind of advice, and how do you call this? Going to a therapist and
Yeah. Counseling.
counseling, yeah, and talk to somebody, but it's hard to find the right counselor.
Well, it's like I've talked about it. I try to be open about this stuff because I don't think we're open enough. I've talked about it extensively. I've been in counseling for a long time. It's like speed dating. You have to find the person that you connect with. There are people that I went to as counselors before that, we just weren't on the same like wavelength. They're excellent at what they do, but the method, it's just like when you're sitting in front of a patient, you can tell there are times when you're just like, I'm not the right surgeon for you. I can do your surgery, but this isn't the relationship that you want. I'm like, I can feel them not feeling comfortable.
Yeah.
And I've become much more in tune with that. So in those situations, many times I will literally offer to get them to somebody else. Tell them, hey, it's no offense to me. If you feel like you'd like another opinion, let me get you to talk to somebody. I want you to feel comfortable. Having a counselor for me is very similar. And I've had counselors over the course of time that it just didn't work out. And then I found one that I've been with consistently. And then I have another, some physician coaches that I relate to well. But one of them asked me recently a question, And, they asked me, said, what are your priorities in life? And I said, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and then I'm a surgeon. And because I really believe that that is my calling. And I don't think that having it in that order detracts anything from my patients. I think for me, I'm a better person when I'm grounded by my family, because I'm the type of person that I will go in there and I'll work to cover up whatever, anxieties or mental stress, or try to overcome this sense that I'm not doing enough to justify my own self-worth and things like that. And I'll go work harder, and then it becomes less and less enjoyable. I lose sight of the fact that I'm helping people, and it just becomes like this, like you said, every time I get a page, or wake up first thing in the morning, I log on to the list on the EMR and I look to see if any of my patients have been admitted overnight, or is there anybody having a problem? Did I get a message? Like, is anybody in the emergency department? And it's just like this terrified fear of something going wrong on somebody that I have really taken great ownership of their health. But it's not just like that ownership. It's really attached so much to my self-worth that it becomes inseparable at times. And so whenever I lose sight of what my priorities are outside of the hospital, it becomes a really dark place for me inside the hospital. Despite the fact that from the outside, it looks like I'm this really incredible, dedicated surgeon that's always there and always caring about their patients and everything. But from the personal side, I'm struggling. And so I get to this point where I was talking to the physician coach, and she asked me what my priorities were. And she said, I got to tell you, I like counselors that can be honest with me, because, again, my ego needs checking at times, many times. And she goes, I got to tell you, looking from the outside, I would never think that those are your priorities. And I was just like, ah. And so then she was, they asked me the question, and I don't remember the exact wording, but it was basically like, who are you? And I still can't answer it. I personally have lost sight of that. And I don't know that I ever knew it. Truthfully, I don't think I ever knew, because I associated so much with what I was accomplishing. So if you ask me, who are you? I was a medical student. Who are you? I'm a resident. Who are you? I'm a surgeon. And then it gets to a point where you are those things, but you still don't. It doesn't feel good, and you're not feeling the accomplishments. The more you succeed, it's not like it's making you feel better. And then you end up in this kind of crisis of going like, what is this? What did I do all this for? And it can really hurt your job satisfaction. And so to hear you say that again, I really, really relate.
Yeah. You have mentioned 3 layers. You are a father, you are a husband, and then you're a doctor. But I will add one layer prior to those. You need to be, or I need to be me.
Yeah.
Because if I am not happy and providing for me, not providing in sense of money, but providing in sense of needs, I don't fulfill my needs as a person.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way that I can be fit and right to provide for my family. And I also don't mean provide for my family in money. I provide in presence, provide in guidance, provide in love, which is basically what the most basic and important need of every human being, acceptance of. So I first need to love myself and accept myself.
Yeah.
Then I can be a father, and then I can be a husband, and then I can love and accept and provide also for my patients.
Probably telling that didn't even cross my mind. I think, like, truthfully, I think that that's the perfect illustration of what I'm talking about. Is when you identify so heavily with something, it's hard not to, though, because we're taught that if you are not 100% dedicated with your whole being to the craft of surgery and to your patients, when I was taught that, the taking ownership and everything, I took that to the extreme, at least in my mind, where I had to dedicate myself to a level that there was nothing else. And there are people out there that they thrive doing that. Everybody's a little different. There are people out there that struggle. And I think that I thrived for a while. I think that I struggle. I think that the truth is when I get into a bad personal situation, I usually work harder. For some reason, I find solace in just being so driven and goal focused on something that the truth is I don't have to answer to any of the thoughts about like the question like who are you? You know what I mean? But whenever I was at work, I was working a lot of hours. My kids were young. I thought I need to get out there. I need to provide. Let's produce. Let's make money. Let's build a career so that my family is secure. But the security of my family I was thinking about was only financial. Obviously, it's very, very important, especially if you've come from no means. But I came home, just like you said, my son knew me, but if my wife was ever working a night shift, no matter what I tried, what I did, half the time I had to call our neighbor who was around a lot to come over and help soothe him because he didn't know me well enough for me to be able to like calm him. And it happened earlier than I thought it would. I thought that I had 5 or 6 years before it really became a thing. And it happened so fast that my wife was just like, he's different when you're not around. And that was a big wake up call for me.
Yeah. So it brings us back a little bit to the mentors that we choose. So the way private practice in Mexico works, I can ask anybody to assist me during a surgery, any surgeon. And in the beginning, I was asking surgeons to assist me who I looked up to because they were great surgeons with their hands, right?
Yes.
And this is when I was going through all these problems with the anxiety and the sense of not being a fulfilled person and surgeon. So I looked a little bit the other way, and I saw this surgeon who was also a good surgeon with his hands. But when you looked at the other side of his life, he was very happy, very fulfilled. He had a beautiful family. He was just not the ego guy that will portray himself like this so that you look up to him.
Mm-hmm.
But I started looking up to him for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I started bringing him over to my surgeries. And little by little, I started opening up about how anxious I felt when I was doing surgery and how anxious I felt as my patients were developing after surgery. And even though my complication rate was very low, I still had a terrible time all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was open with him about this, and this guy was a great surgeon, but is a wonderful human being. He told me after we finished the surgery, is there anything in this surgery that you want to change right now? And I will say, no. Are you satisfied with everything that your hands have produced? And I said, yes. Well, now you don't have to worry about anything because you've done your 100%.
Yeah.
Now, up to the condition of the patient and the patient's own ability to heal in order for your situation to be successful.
Yeah.
So just let go. And little by little, his words would help me to let go and to start looking at this other side of being a surgeon, which was being a good person. And I started looking to have mentors that will guide me not through being a good surgeon with my hands, but a wholesome person. And I think this is important, and we don't look at this very often. We are looking to be like the surgeon that we meet in the OR and the hospital, but we don't look at the other side of their life. And we need to understand what's making them successful as parents, husbands, and just functional individuals in a society.
Yeah, no, I think it's a weird balance, right? Because you have to portray confidence in the operating room for the team and for your patients. And so there is a level of performance that you need to do to make things work well. But whenever you perform that, you also have to put aside some of your own internal needs to do that for them. What happens is whenever we have residents or other trainees or people working with you, there can be the perception that, when I work with Dr. Valenzuela, he's always confident. He always knows what he's doing. He never worries about anything. And because that's the person you need to be for the patient. And then we have the trainees that if we're not open and specifically discuss it purposefully, they can come under this idea that somehow you're, this extremely confident person, and they come out going, I want to be like him. And when they get out and they are rattled, the first time in practice that I went to cut a cystic duct on a gallbladder was like one of the most stressful things I've ever done. I'd done tons of them, but I looked around the room and I said, nobody here is going to stop me if I'm about to cut the common duct. Like realistically, it's just me. And you talk about feeling isolated, that's a level of isolation. And so then I thought back to my mentors, and most of my mentors at the time, I'd put in the people that were just so technically skilled, just incredible technicians in the operating room, would do things that you get done and you're just like, how did they do that? That's incredible. Like, I just couldn't believe it. And they never once showed doubt, right? It was always confident. It was clip, cut, next, off the next case, walk away. And I'm not feeling that way. And I'm going, well, I must not be a very good surgeon because I don't feel that way. And so then whenever I get to the point of, like you're talking about with your mentor, where they say like, hey, is there anything else that you would do in that case differently? And I'm a perfectionist. So, at many times I will, push for that. And so if I'm being honest with myself, no, there's nothing I would do differently. And I think it went fine. But if there is a complication, somehow there's still enough of a weird perception in my own brain where the answer is not, I did everything I could. It was a good surgery. This is the unfortunate side of, this is the part of medicine that we can't control. This is why we have complication rates, even if things go well. Even in perfect scenarios, there are aspects of the patient that we can't control, patient factors, how they do things. There are aspects of everything is out. So much of it is out of our control, despite our best efforts. So when things do go wrong, and even when I've said like, hey, this is the best I can do, the question where I struggle is occasionally, it's becoming less frequent now, just with reps, but occasionally I go, well, that's because they went to the wrong surgeon, right? If they'd have gone to someone else, maybe they wouldn't have had this problem. And that can really be devastating if you ever let yourself go down that pathway of normal surgical practice and normal complication rates, which happen despite our best efforts. It can feed back into, well, it supports that anxiety.
Yeah. Well, brings me to think about a very recent case that I have. It's not about the case; it's about the situation.
Mhm.
In the hospital where I practice, there's a very beloved anesthesiologist, and this anesthesiologist is a wonderful guy. He's a really a great guy. He was also a mentor to my brother, the anesthesiologist. So he has a big incisional hernia as a result of Hartmann's procedure, Hartmann's reversal, and then open prostate surgery for prostate cancer. So he's open from the top to the bottom. He has a huge ventral hernia.
Mhm.
He comes to me. Everybody tells him to come to me because, in everybody's opinion, I'm the right surgeon for him. In my opinion, I am also the right surgeon for him.
Sure.
So he comes to me, and of course, I do all prehabilitation. Let's leave medicine aside. Everything is done correctly.
Right.
I do the surgery. Not only I do it consciously, doing my best effort, but if you look at the surgery, if you look at the video, which could be in my channel in a few weeks, if you look at the video, you see a surgery nicely done. There was not a lot of bleeding, nothing. As the surgery was finished, the sense that I had of having done a good job was great. I was high-fiving with my team. Everybody was happy.
Yeah.
We sent him home the following morning. Of course, this is a big robotar. He's feeling great. He has no pain. He goes home the following morning. And this is a Tuesday. And then I get a call from him Thursday evening saying, I'm not feeling so great. I have a little bit of abdominal pain, but it's not from the surgery. It's just abdominal pain. And the right side of my abdomen, it's a little red, and I'm feeling tachycardic. So I tell him, you're probably just developing ileus, and on the right side of your abdomen, there's probably a hematoma because I removed the drain too early. Let's wait it out and see how you feel tomorrow. During the night, his wife calls me and he's in septic shock. So I bring him to the hospital. Long story short, he has how do you say this? That when you don't realize you have a small bowel injury.
Enterotomy? Unrecognized enterotomy? Yeah.
Unrecognized enterotomy. That's the word. Thank you. So I go back in. I see the enterotomy. It's in an adhesion. It's a tiny little thing, but he has to have a bowel resection, anastomosis. Of course, my whole repair is contaminant. The whole thing, right?
Right.
And it's just at the point in which everybody around me starts looking at me like the hernia specialist.
Yeah.
He looks at me as the hernia specialist. I portrayed myself as the hernia specialist. And this individual that is so important to so many people, and so many people pointed him towards me, this happens.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, am I the right surgeon for him? So in this moment in doubt, for myself, I had a lot of low confidence. And I remember I will go to his bed and try to tell him everything is going to be okay. But those words just couldn't come out of my mouth.
Right.
It was him who one day just tapped me in the hand. And he looked at me like I don't know what kind of look I had in my face, but he's tapping me in the hand. And he told me, everything is going to be fine. I'm going to be okay. He is telling me, right? He's reassuring me that I am the right surgeon for him.
Yeah.
So weeks went by. He came out of the septic shock. He did fine. I closed him. I removed the mesh and I closed him with an RTL kind of closure. And he's doing okay. Looking hindsight, was I the right surgeon for him? Of course I was.
Yeah.
Not because I am the surgeon that doesn't have complications. Every single surgeon has complications. I was the right surgeon for him because I stood by him.
Yes.
This is the most important thing that you should do when you have a patient with a complication. And you're going to have complications always.
Yeah.
Did I have this realization by myself? Of course not. And we go back to mentorship. I reached out to David Chen, and I reached out to Yuri Novitsky, and I reached out to Konrad Balleser. And I told them, I'm going through the worst time in my life. This just happened to me, and I'm making a big drama about it. It was my moment to make a big drama about it, and I felt like crap.
Yeah.
And they told me, Hector, chill a little bit. This just happened to you. It's going to continue to happen to you, and will happen to other surgeons as well.
Yeah.
Bad things happen to good surgeons, and it's not how you prevent them. I mean, you have to do everything to prevent them.
Right.
But the most important thing is what you do after they happen.
Yeah.
Are you going to abandon the patient? Are you going to fall into the temptation of letting another surgeon take over? Or are you going to stand by your patient?
Yeah.
Get help from whoever you need to get help from, and stand by him and watch him through the whole situation. And this is what builds us. This is what makes us better.
Yeah.
All right? We have to, okay, this thing happened, it's bad, let it go, but now stay by his side. And this guy had a lot of temptations as well. Imagine an anesthesiologist, how many surgeons he knows.
Sure.
How many other doctors he knows. And all of these doctors, his wife told me, came into the hospital and told him, let me take over. I'll get you better. Let me do this. Let me do that. Have a second opinion by this other surgeon that we know is really good. And he said, no, my doctor is Hector, and I stay by him. So, I mean, these things teach you a lot. But for me, the greatest teaching point is that we have to stand by our patients. And this is what's going to make us grow up.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's one thing that you talk about, reaching out to other people. I do that frequently because one of my fears is I will lose objectivity because I do take it so personal. And so I never abandon people. I stick with them, and if I have a patient struggling, I give them my cell phone number. I will check on them routinely, even outside, just because I feel like they need, that kind of access. I don't want them to get stuck in some like call service loop when they're trying to be dealt with, dealing with an issue. Um, but I do think that it can be so devastating to us when we are in that situation, that it is important to reach out to friends and colleagues and have that conversation, because there is the tendency. I see some people that I think it's really easy to over or undercompensate. You either go put your head in the sand and say, it'll be okay. This happens. Never mind. You never look objectively at yourself to say, is there something I could have done differently? The answer might be no. But if there is, try to learn from it. Otherwise, you just run the risk of doing the same thing again.
Yeah.
But then there's also the other side of, how aggressively, do you at that point, then you're going, every little time they have a hiccup, get another CT scan, and so you can like overtreat people. And so I rely on friends and colleagues within the community. And I say, listen, this is the situation, this is what I want to do. Am I doing the thing for the patient, or am I so caught up in how I am taking it personally that I'm losing objectivity? And so I will reach out, and to my friends' credits, they my colleagues' credits, they always look at it, and sometimes they're like, yeah, I wouldn't probably get a scan if they maybe give the labs another day and make sure that they're heading in the right, give them one more day, and they may temper it a little bit, or they may say, no, that's absolutely right, or whatever. But it just is the secondary trauma of that situation can be devastating to the surgeon, and it's almost like I feel guilty when I'm feeling bad about it, because I'm going like, I'm not the one laying there with septic shock, and so you kind of feel bad feeling bad. And that, I don't think it's helpful. I think that it requires that open communication and conversation, because otherwise you could have a possibility of having something that could potentially be very bad for the situation it is currently, but in the future, learning from that, being able to share your experience, and things like that. It's a great point to bring up, which is one of my first interactions and even becoming aware of you, because I was so scared of everything, that I avoided interacting with the larger hernia community for a long time, just because I was just like, I'm not like those guys, like I'm not to that level. And I remember going to the AHS this year, and I saw you give a presentation about when you were at another hospital and somebody got into the I think it was femoral or iliac vein. Yeah. And you showed the video, which was a masterpiece of management. The person, if you weren't there, the operation they would have received would have been dramatically different. And that doesn't even count the outcome. I mean, the long-term implications of the way you handled that was amazing. And I took a lot of little tips and tricks away from the technical aspect. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the way there was somebody that came up, and I can't remember what was said. It was not necessarily disparaging, but the way that you talked about the surgeon that you were helping, I think that was the part that really stood out to me, as how incredibly humble you were, and how it would have been very easy for your ego to dunk on this dude that had a bad case. And you'd be like, I came in, saved the day. They had done this, and I came and did this and this, and everybody clap, and we all go back and go, man, Hector's an incredible surgeon. But I think that was the humanity with which you treated your colleague that called for your help. I think that's the part that stood out to me the most. It was not something necessarily that you said. It was just the overall attitude and how you presented it. And so I just want to give you kudos really for that, because I think that that's what I took away more than anything, about not only your technical skills, but just who you are as a person.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't do this often enough, because we talk about complications, and it's way easier to talk about other people's complications than your own complications. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to talk when you solve somebody else's complications, because you're putting yourself up high. But in order for you to be able to solve this complication, things happened that led for you to be at the side of that patient, and we don't pay attention to that enough. And this guy, he's a friend of mine, by the way. He reached out. He handed me his surgery. He trusted me with. He was responsible for the patient, but he trusted me to make the situation a little better. And we don't talk about that often enough. And I think if we do a better job about how we should be humble when we have complications, and we should hand the case probably to somebody who's in a better position at that time to fix it. If we talk about it more often, it would be better for us to also involve more people or hand the patient to somebody that can make him better. Yeah, I don't know if I am telling the words correctly in English.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that it's always important to be humble, because if you are not humble, life is going to make you humble,
Sure.
right?
And yeah, surgery, every time I feel like I'm on a good run, and it's always driving home from the hospital and kind of going like, man, that went well, and pat yourself on the back. That's always the first harbinger that something's coming to bring you back to earth in my experience. Yeah.
So in my team, they laugh about me because we have cases, right? And we do these surgeries. And sometimes as the surgery is over, my team, there's two other surgeons working with me, Juan Pablo and Roland. And as we finish the surgery, I see they're high-fiving and they're super happy and pumped and excited because we did this big case and everything was great. And when they looked at me, I'm dead quiet. I'm not even smiling. I'm like, take it easy.
Yeah.
We'll see in a month. We'll
Exactly.
have another in a month.
Yeah.
Let's see how things develop, right? Because you have to be humble. You have to accept the fact that none of that, or just a part of that, is in your control.
Yeah.
There are many other factors that happen and that are not in your control that may lead you to feel unsatisfied at some point.
Sure. Yeah. Patients, every time you go into the recovery room to see the patient and their family, make sure they're doing okay before they go home. And they're always like, thank you so much. It was, you're amazing. And I always tell them, I'm like, let's wait till 6 weeks. Let's wait till 6 weeks. Well,
that's you want the local anesthesia.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about this later. Let's not count the chickens for the eggs hatch here. I think it's just such an interesting thing to talk to everybody, because it is such a universal experience of what we go through as surgeons, and the ups and downs and the humbling aspect of what we do. And it's lost sometimes in the internet sphere, where it's very, very easy to be critical in a comment section. And it's really easy also to be to underestimate or overestimate people's skills based on the videos that they post, right? We have aspects of all of our surgeries that don't look as smooth, and some that look smooth, and so I'm always it's always impressive to me to see people post their realistic, expectations, because I think that there is definitely benefit to seeing what can be done and editing it to look smooth, so you kind of see a nice pattern and flow of what it looks like, and the learning how to do it aspect. There's also the very, very important part of looking at it from this is what can go wrong aspect, and that's one of my biggest. I say it frequently, which is there's no better surgeon than the surgeon sitting in an M&M conference making a discussion about someone else's case when they know the whole case and the outcome. Yeah, we're always the best. We're always the people that's just like, well, I would have done it this way, and it would have turned out this way, and everything like that. And we're not in that situation, and that always frustrates me. Because many times now, I'm not saying that there aren't times that you look at stuff and you go like, the decision made at the time probably wasn't the decision I would have made, right? But there are definitely aspects where good things and the information you have at the time dictates your actions or the way you care for something, and then you look back and go, well, that didn't go well, and I can learn from that. But it's always humbling. I try to take it from a humbling standpoint, not from like just a chance to make myself look better at someone else's expense.
But this doesn't talk about the medical aspect of the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
This always goes back to the human aspect of the doctor. And that's why we can't, or we will not be the best or the greatest surgeon that one can be if you're not working to be the best and the greater person.
Yeah.
If you're not working on yourself, there's absolutely no way you can work in, or you can perform very, very good in the operating room.
Right.
For me, a few years back, I did things to look good. I was I was I'm going to be very honest about this. I needed attention. I needed attention not only from my patients, but also from the surgeons around me. I needed them to see that I was good,
Yeah.
and I needed my patients to know that I was good, so they will choose me as their surgeon.
Sure.
And then, as the international hernia collaboration came into my life, and this is where I learned minimally invasive surgery, because I didn't have any training in MIS hernia surgery, and I started to do a little more. I needed the international hernia collaboration attention.
Mhm.
I needed other surgeons elsewhere to note me, and I worked so hard in doing really good operations that this started haunting me.
Yeah.
And whenever the outcome was not as I expected, I wasn't comfortable.
Right.
And this is just my ego driving me to places where I wasn't sure I wanted to go. Very smart persons, people, come into my life at this point in time. I meet, as I mentioned, Conrad, I meet David Chen, I meet Yuri, I met Igor, and very importantly, I meet Brian Jacob, who was a guest of yours a few weeks back.
Yeah.
And they teach me things, especially Brian and David, in the way they handle themselves, being such great surgeons and world references, but the way that they handle themselves in which such humbleness. It teaches me that what I'm striving for at that point is not okay, because I'm striving for a result in the OR. I'm not striving for a change in life.
Yeah.
So when I realized this, my the way the way I practice, the way I see every patient changes. Because right now I'm not trying to do this beautiful hernia repair so I don't get a recurrence, so my percentage grows and my ego grows. I'm trying to do this perfect hernia repair so this person has a better quality of life.
Yep.
And can go back to doing whatever they were doing before they had the hernia, and they can say they are better from having the surgery. Okay, so brings us back to, you have to work on the human before you can be a doctor, right? So right now, this is what gives purpose in my practice. Every patient that I have an opportunity to be a surgeon for, or an interaction, before every surgery, I have this. They don't see it as a ritual. They just see it like the doctor came to the room. But for me, in my mind, it's a ritual. When I go to greet them and greet their family before surgery, I make sure we say hi. I hold their hands, and I tell them with all honesty and from the bottom of my heart that that day, in that moment, I am a vessel to do good things for them.
Yeah.
And that whatever my human ability allows me to provide in sense of health and restoring their quality of life, I will do my best.
Yeah.
And the outcome, when you're acting from love to another human being, is always going to be good.
Yeah.
And even if they have complications, even if the result is not exactly what you were looking for, you know that you were doing your best. And this is also something that makes you as a surgeon and as a person have a little bit of comfort when things don't go so well.
Sure. Yeah, I think I've said it to patients before, like, listen, I can't guarantee an outcome, but I can promise you that there'll be nobody that cares more about it.
Yeah.
Nobody cares more about trying to get this right for you than I do. and that you're going to get my best. Uh, so a little bit of I kind of want to. This is maybe a little existential, but you talked about being there for the patient, right? And so
Mhm.
you want to give your whole self and be the vessel for them. How much of you being able to be that person for your patient in the change that you underwent over the past however many years, how much of that was directly related to you being able to be that person for yourself?
Uh, Please rephrase the question. I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah. So were you able to be that I'm going to be there for them and I'm going to be, I'm going to give to them as their physician, as their surgeon. I'm going to give to
Mhm.
them everything that I have and be there for them. How much of that changed where you went from wanting to be a really good surgeon and wanting to do a good surgery to wanting to give to that patient your skills and wanting to provide them their best outcome for them as a human? How much of that development, of that change in mindset, how much of that was related to you learning how to be that person for yourself?
For myself, of
Yeah.
course. Um, it's very important. I think I don't want to say 100%, but it's completely related.
Mhm.
Um, Once I found myself again taking care of me, music, sports, uh, recreational time,
Mhm.
family time, and finding happiness in my life, then I could be a lot better for them. This doesn't mean that I spend all of my time in the hospital, all of my time rounding patients, or that I'm doing very long surgeries because I want them to get a whole lot of me in the operating room.
Mhm.
This just means that whatever percentage of my time in our interaction I am going to give them, they're going to get the 100% of me that I can provide.
Yeah.
And then as soon as of this interaction is over, there's another interaction with another patient,
Mhm.
or another interaction with a resident, or another interaction with a family of a patient. And then when I come home, it's the same, right?
Yes.
My children have things that they want to talk to me about. My wife has things that she wants to talk to me about and do. And then I have friends. And then I have this part of my life that developed without me planning for it, which is the academic life,
Mhm.
uh, going to congresses and speaking. And I don't feel that I can give the right message if I am not first okay with myself.
Mhm.
That's I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
What you described is something I talk about a lot. I struggle with just being present. You're there, and
Yeah.
you're present at multiple aspects of your life, but it sounds like it started with you being able to be present with yourself, uh, and getting past the ego of what you thought you're expected to be, and getting down to like who you really are, and that self-awareness that allows you to kind of progress. Because you talk about like Brian Jacob, his story that he talked about on the podcast. He has a very similar story of wasn't always the person he is now.
Yeah.
Went through his own transitions, went through his own phases of life, his own awareness, and developed a self-awareness that when you have a conversation with him, if you don't know what it is, you just know it's different.
Yeah.
If you get down to it and you start to recognize it, it's a lot of self-awareness, and it's a lot of work.
It's a
So
lot
I
more.
yeah.
Yeah, and also it's never over because
Right.
it's happened to me. I reached a point in my life, let's say a few years back, that everything is so nice and stable.
Mhm.
And I'm waking up every morning, I'm meditating, I'm writing in my journal, I'm working out, my patients are doing great, family life is going great. You know, I have made it.
Yep.
And then you realize that this is so fragile.
Yes.
Something will happen,
Yeah.
will make you stumble a little bit.
Yep.
And all these sense of wholesomeness or awareness and all these realizations that you have in your life, suddenly they're gone away.
Yep.
You can't concentrate to meditate. You don't have time to write in your journal. You're working out, but you're not putting your body in it. You're just working out because you're
Sure.
not enjoying it anymore. And then you're going to work and you're going through a crisis again.
Yep.
And this is something that we have to understand. It's a continuous work.
Yeah.
You will always need to start all over, start from the bottom and say, okay, so what bumped me off the pathway this time, and how do I get around it? How do I get back in the right pathway? And it's a work that it's never over.
And it's work that's best done with a community of people that understand.
Yeah.
Because eventually the people that you rely on during those times, they have their own bumps, and you get the opportunity to be there for them the way they were there for you. And I find personally there's very little things more fulfilling for me than being able to be there for the people that gave kind of unconditionally to me whenever I was not the best version of myself. You talk about the different versions. It's kind of funny how we do have a lot in common. I played college basketball, and I also have a band. Although it's kind of gone away because I haven't dedicated the time for it. And but I used the band. I was in bands all growing up, and I wanted to be a musician. My dad told me, no, you're not allowed to be a musician. I can't. He did it. He put out a folk album in the '70s, and he's like, you can't make a living doing it, and you need to do something that's going to put you in a more financially secure, or at least a career path that's a little bit more well defined. Because he always struggled with the fact that it was just an everyday battle of wondering where the next paycheck was going to come from, and all that stuff. And so but I used music as one of the things that fulfilled me, and even wrote during the first time that I was ever aware I was in a crisis, if that makes sense. I've been in crises throughout my life, but half the time I was never aware that I was in it. I always just thought that the people around me suck, or this job sucks, or this sucks. I never realized it was like an internal issue that I was going to have to deal with personally. It was like, it's one of those, you look at your people around you and you go, you ever know, you want to talk to people who come to you and they always have the same problems. You want to be like, you ever think about the fact that you keep having the exact same problem with every single person you interact with? Maybe it's you, you're the only common denominator. And that's kind of where I reached in my life. I was like, another crisis, and this person's not living up to my expectations or not doing what I need from them. And so I realized I was in a crisis, and that kind of put me, and that's what the episode I shared with you was about. But I actually used I used the music as journaling, essentially. And so I would journal it. So I actually wrote my album, the last album I released with my band Blue Animal. It was a concept album, basically rolling through my own personal journey. And I put a lot of work into that, as far as it was just, for me, it was therapeutic, but it literally just chronicled this whole realization of accomplishment doesn't lead to happiness, and there, and trying to figure out who am I, and all those aspects. And so you got to the end of it, and I was like, I've made it. I finally have this amazing self-awareness. And then you go for a while and everything's all roses, just like you're talking about. You're like, oh, I'm working out. I've got this great relationship. I'm healthy. And then all of a sudden, like you said, there's this one trigger, and it can be so difficult to accept that you've got to do it again.
Yeah,
or you've got to keep doing it. It's because especially early on, when you're first going through those changes, it is so tiring, and it is so hard to kind of deal with that. And then you kind of get to the next phase and you go, again, here we go again. And that's when I found it being very helpful to rely on friends to do that. And so, I was having another one of those deals, and that's really where this podcast actually came from, was, other people have to be experiencing this too. We should just talk about it. But I really appreciate your willingness to share. I think that, like you said, there's the perception of people when we're posting, and we're seeing the academic side of everything, and then there's the human aspect. And I think that having people such as yourself talk about the human aspect of what we do and everything like that, I think it's invaluable because, out there across the world, there's so many of us that are in our own personal struggle. And it's just that one person that you kind of go, hey, actually, they get it. I'm not the only one in the world that's that way. They actually get it too. And so I appreciate your willingness to share. It really means a lot to me.
I'm happy to do it because other people, other surgeons have talked to me and they have guided me through situations, and it's just meant it's made my life and my practice and my family interactions and my friends a whole lot better because we're always looking ahead, and I'm saying to myself, when I reach that point, I'm going to be so happy.
Right.
When I reach that point, I'm going to be so happy. And then I look back and I asked the Hector of 12 years ago when he finished residency, if I were to tell you 12 years later, your life is going to be like this, how would you be? Oh man, I'll be so happy.
Yeah.
And then you realize that you're not being as happy as you could be.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this? What are you missing? What are you not allowing yourself to why are you not allowing yourself to be as happy as you plan to be, right?
Right.
And it's just other people sharing that they go through these same struggles makes you feel reassured that okay, yeah, we're all in the same search.
Yeah, no, it's this has been just a fantastic conversation. I really do. Again, I really appreciate it. On the podcast, as we come to a close of an episode, I always give people an opportunity to do their hernia hot take. And
Okay.
so this is the chance for Hector's hernia hot take here.
Okay, so this is not going to be about a surgical technique. This is more on a more broad subject. The biggest skill that a surgeon needs to develop is criteria, because criteria will help you do the right thing, right? Choose the right technique for the right patient. I'm not going to advocate for IPOM or ETEP or PTEP, which I will be very biased about. I'm going to advocate about developing criteria. And the biggest area where a surgeon should work in order to be a good surgeon is on themselves. You need to work on yourself. Be first a good human being, a good person, and then you can be a good surgeon. I don't know if
that is I 100% I 100% agree with that. That's really been my that's how I've approached my life over the past few years, and I feel like I've seen some of the benefits of that with my patients, and so I couldn't agree more. So I really, again, I very much appreciate you coming on the Hernia Gods podcast. This is your mere mortal host, Luke Elm, sign off here with Hector Valenzuela. We sure appreciate you coming on.
It's my pleasure. Look forward to meeting you in person, and thank you for doing this. Thank you for putting it out there for us.
Well, thank you. All right. See you next time, guys.